Something about oysters brings me back to Paris, you know, as a young 19-year-old reading Hemingway's Movable Feast, talking about as I ate the oysters with the cold taste of the sea and washed them down with the crisp white wine, lost the empty feeling and began to be happy and to make plans. Oysters, when they're really good, that you always kind of have this feeling there's something wonderful that's about ready to happen. Yeah, that looks good. I'm John Rowley, and I've had a lifelong love affair with the oyster since 18 or 19 years old. Oh, it's all about water, and it's all about clean water.
Water, water everywhere, and it's not all the same. Sparkling, salty, alkaline, or bottled, this pure life-sustaining substance permeates our food chain and can make all the difference in the quality of the food we eat. In Quilcene, Washington, a few miles from Seattle, the life of an oyster, from spawning to maturity, depends on the water in which it lives. The taste, the texture, the shape, the size are all determined by their saltwater home. Oyster expert John Rowley waxes poetic about this life aquatic, so integral to the growth of this briny treat.
This is an oyster picnic I put together. Just turn a bucket upside down on the oyster bed and...
Nice way to spend an afternoon.
I've had the pleasure of working with restaurants in Seattle and Chicago and Washington, D.C., putting their oyster bars together and just been having a lot of fun. You know, I've had great oyster moments with Julia Child, and that woman, she had an enormous capacity for oysters on the half shell. I'm pretty sure I've seen her put away about 6 dozen oysters at a sitting. And I kept up with her, you know. She was,
I don't think I've ever counted. I bet I could do that easily.
I've seen you do that. Well, Bill, it's always a pleasure.
Salute.
Bill Taylor is a 4th generation oysterman. His family has been in this business here for over 100 years.
These oysters come a long ways from the hatchery. It's probably there 4 years ago when first was spawned and been on the beach here for the last couple of years, and then it goes down so fast.
Taylor Shellfish Farms has a hatchery in Quilcene, Washington. Dabob Bay is a little bay that runs off the north end of Hood Canal in Puget Sound. I like coming to the hatchery because every time I come, I learn something new, I see something new, and it's fascinating.
John, these are the adult oysters. We call them broodstock that we actually use to spawn. We bring them in, we warm the water up, 20 degrees Celsius or so. We add food until they're ready to spawn.
So it's a combination of food and temperature.
Food and temperature makes them think of springtime and lets them condition. Yeah, says it's time to reproduce.
An oyster reproduces by producing male or female gametes.
See all this white here? They're all oyster eggs. And on the bottom side, if I turn that over, you see the eggs actually running down that knife?
Yeah. Now in the bay, they spew, don't they? Like
yes.
Make a milky cloud in the water?
They'll make a cloud in the water. You'll see them clapping and they'll just spew out the sperm and egg. Usually within a few minutes to a half hour, they'll all be spawning.
A lot of action.
A lot of action. Once one gets started, they all get going.
The larvae are microscopic, and the larvae are free-swimming, and they have a little sticky head. Whatever they run into, that's where they spend the rest of their life.
They want to attach to something. Hopefully it's something we want them to attach to. Like this shell, which has been dried and ground and screened, is roughly the same size as an oyster larvae is. It's ready to go through metamorphosis. It's ready to set. About 9 million little oysters right there, just about ready to go through metamorphosis.
If all those larvae were to survive, that would be more than enough to feed the whole New York City half-shell market for a year, wouldn't it?
That they would. Be your key word if they were all to survive, and that never happened. The seed you're seeing here is probably 6 weeks to 8 weeks post-set from larvae stage.
This
Same
is
thing, just the small end versus the big end.
Those are so cute.
If you look at the bigger one there, you can see it's starting to take the shape of an actual adult oyster.
At a certain point, they're large enough to be moved to something called a flupsy, which is abbreviation for a floating upwelling system, which is a nursery system, and you have paddle wheels that pump water up through big containers of oyster seed, forcing a lot of seawater through the all these little oysters, and so they have a lot of food going through and they grow pretty rapidly. So how much water we got going through there?
The whole thing circulates 15 to 1,800 gallons a minute.
Wow. And then when they reach a certain size, they can be put out into the bay. So if you can get them to a certain size, their survival is much higher. 6 to 8 weeks in the flupsy, feeding under ideal conditions. They go from this size to this size. It's pretty astounding.
Baby oysters are sprinkled like seeds along the shoreline of the Totten Inlet. Snug in their tidal flats, oysters feed on algae to their heart's content until they grow fat and healthy. But they give back to the sea too. As water passes through the oyster, it is filtered, making the water cleaner. Environmentalists attribute excellent water quality with thriving oyster populations. It's a win-win state of affairs.
We spread the oyster seed kind of like grass seed. You just kind of toss it out. Year and a half to 2 years before these are ready to eat.
This is fun. Yeah, oysters got it pretty good. They just lay there in bed and
eat.
And feed away.
Just amazing how fat these oysters get. The algae in the bay really give it an incredible flavor and all that nice fat.
One of the great things about the hatchery is you can reproduce these different species of oysters.
There's the Olympia oyster, which is the smallest of the oysters here, and it's the native oyster to Puget Sound. And then we've got the Kumamoto oysters here. If you can notice, there's a real deep cup there, and it's pretty round, and it's also a real meaty oyster. Then you've got the Virginica. It's kind of a flat shell, pretty decent meat in it, originally from the East Coast. And then we've got the Pacific oyster, came originally from Japan.
All of these oysters can be reproduced in the hatchery, and without the hatchery, we wouldn't have all of these exciting oyster varieties in the oyster bars.
So do you have a favorite, John?
Well, my favorite of your oysters is the one I'm eating, whichever one it is. What more could one want out of life?
Yeah.
Man, is that good. You look around the country and around the world, there's so many areas that used to be great oyster producing areas that have been lost now, like probably the prime example in this country is the Chesapeake. They're harvesting just a fraction of 1% of what used to come out of that bay. And here, am I right in saying that the oyster industry is actually in a growth mode?
In fact, we're probably producing more oysters than we have ever produced. I mean, part of it is that the shellfish growers have worked hard to protect the waters here and make sure that we can continue to harvest. And
oh, I love this light.
Yeah.
Oyster light. I like to call it oyster light, when you have a cloudy sky, but the light is luminous somehow. I feel like I'm standing in the middle of a great poem. It's a great oyster moment, Bill.
Yeah, it is.